Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. Today again we are with Kittu Reddy for The Ideal of Human Unity, Chapter 6. Wonderful. Welcome, Kittu.
So I'll quickly give not resume, just some points of the chapter 5, the one that you asked. Thus, the nation is a persistent psychological unity which nature has been busy developing throughout the world in most various forms and educating into physical and political unity. Political unity is not the essential factor. It may not yet be realized, and yet the nation persists. And then he develops the idea, and then finally he says, and so it will remain until a greater living unit can be found into which the nation idea can merge in obedience to a superior attraction. Because we are moving towards world unity. The nation is at the moment the living unit. Now we have to take the next step. That means you can't have directly world unity. The next big grouping, which must become a psychological unit. And at that time, the idea of continental unity was not yet there because there was something else. That was the empires. Can the empires be converted into a real unit? That means a living psychological unit. Because then it will be a clear indication that nature is moving from nation to empire to world unity. So he is not giving you an answer, he is discussing the problem. All right? Now, basically, he is showing that there has been a tendency towards larger and larger groupings and aggregates. And this also I told last time that there are empires and empires, or larger groupings and larger groupings. Some are homogeneous to a greater extent, and some are very heterogeneous. The Indian Empire, Chandragupta's empire, Mughal empire, Samudragupta's empire, they are more homogeneous than heterogeneous. But the British Empire is very different because England conquering India, there is hardly anything in common, right? So he calls that a heterogeneous unit. So now to convert the empire into a real psychological unit is a real problem. The true problem of empire therefore remains how to transform the artificial political unity of a heterogeneous empire, heterogeneous in racial composition, language and culture, into a real psychological unit. This problem was faced by the British and the French in the modern times because it was heterogeneous in racial composition, in language and culture. How do you create that sense of psychological unity? So that is what we are going to study now. And in the study of history, it's always wise and desirable to go back and see in the past whether any such attempt has been made, what are the reasons of its success, if it has been successful, and what are the causes of its failure. So here he is giving us one example, that is the Roman Empire. Now you must remember that the Roman Empire lasted 5 centuries. It started with Julius Caesar. Augustus Caesar founded it on a very solid basis, and it lasted 5 centuries. And in 476 AD, that is the official date, the empire collapsed, which most historians or many historians say was the result of the invasion of the barbarians, that is the Teutons, the Franks, the Goths, etc., etc. Now, Aurobindo doesn't agree with that opinion. He has a different perception completely, and I'll explain that different perception. Now, like everybody, every empire is built. First, it is by military conquest, then military colonization. But Rome was not satisfied with that. Once that conquest was assured, he was not content with holding it together as an artificial political unit, which was administratively beneficent and which made it acceptable to the conquered peoples, because he gave them a good administration. He gave them the basic needs. He had too sure a political instinct to be so easily satisfied. For it is certain that if he had stopped short there, the empire would have broken up at a much earlier date. Why, when you are getting all the basic needs of life, still Aurobindo says the empire would have broken up at an earlier date? The peoples under his sway would have preserved their sense of separate nationality, and once accustomed to Roman efficiency and administrative organization, would inevitably have tended to the separate enjoyment of these advantages as independent organized nations. This is a crucial idea, that once you are habituated to your comfortable, decent, good life, but you have preserved your individuality and your individual culture, at that stage you will want to reassert your individual culture. And so there might be a kind of reaction and might be ultimately even a revolt.
But Kittu, last time you mentioned that Rome allowed these various cultures.
I'll give you the very next sentence. It was this sense of separate nationality which the Roman rule succeeded in blotting out wherever it established its own dominant influence.
Okay.
That sense of separateness was abolished, even culturally. And it was not done by the brutal German way, as he calls it, the brutal Teutonic way. Stupid expedient of a brutal force after the Teutonic fashion, but by peaceful pressure. Now, this is a very crucial thing. Rome realized that after having conquered almost the whole of Europe and big parts of Africa and even the eastern part, that there was a culture which they had conquered, which was in many ways superior to them. It was the Greek culture. So what they did, they compounded with the Greek culture. It is called the Greco-Roman culture. Many history books will tell you that Rome completely destroyed Greece. It is not true. It is partially true. Politically, of course, they were destroyed. And to a certain extent, even their literature or some things were destroyed. But they could not destroy too much the Acropolis, the other architecture. Some sculptures were damaged, but they could not destroy everything. So she created a Greco-Roman civilization, left the Greek tongue to spread and secure it in the East. But everywhere else, it introduced it through Latin. That means they translated the Greek works into Latin and introduced it into the empire. But even this might not be enough. So they opened all the doors to everybody to take part in all the benefits, rights of citizenship. In other words, anybody as part of the empire could aspire to the highest post, could become the emperor. And it happened. See, an Iberian Spaniard, an African, etc., etc. Right? So, it is like imagining that if the British did that to India, that means any Indian could have aspired to become the Prime Minister of England and therefore of the whole empire. So the Romans did this. And naturally it was a tremendous step forward. But even there, it failed. So he says, so far the Romans succeeded. Where he failed, it was due to the essential vice of his method. Now I'll explain this. By crushing out, however peacefully, the living cultures of the incipient individuality of the peoples he ruled, he deprived those peoples of their sources of vitality, the roots of their force. Have you understood this sentence? Absolutely clear.
So initially...
No, it is very important to understand this.
Initially they gave freedom.
No, they gave you complete freedom.
Yeah, and then?
No, they crushed out the living culture and made you feel that you are part of the Roman culture. Right? It is like making you feel
Yes, understand.
that you are Indian.
Sure.
In everything. That you have given up your Americanness completely. And there are many Indians who have tried to give up their Indianness and become Englishmen, right? Now, this is very important because by crushing out, however peacefully, the living cultures and the incipient individuality of the peoples he ruled, he deprived these peoples of their sources of vitality. Unless you are yourself, your source of vitality is gone. See, now this is the real problem in any collective unit where there is so much diversity, and Aurobindo has to face this problem very acutely because you have God knows how many nations represented in Aurobindo. Each one of them have got their own way of looking at things, etc., etc. You have to harmonize all these, not by making them part of a common culture, which might evolve and emerge gradually, but it has to come from below and not from above, right? And so this is the real problem of Aurobindo, and Aurobindo, if it can solve its problem, it's an example for the rest of the world, right? So
this is Mother's pavilions.
This is Mother's, what did you say?
The pavilions
Yes,
of different cultures.
Yes. So now, you see, that is why when you join Aurobindo, at the beginning, it is not expected or it is not demanded that you accept Mother and Sri Aurobindo. But you believe in world unity. And if you believe in world unity, ultimately you will find that you will come to Sri Aurobindo. In the ashram, you are admitted only, theoretically at least, if you accept Sri Aurobindo and the Mother as representatives of the divine, and therefore your gurus, right? Aurobindo has been given a different function. It is true that gradually those who have accepted the spirit of Aurobindo will move inevitably towards the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. But that is not the starting point. Here it is, the starting point is straight away this, right? So the main point is this, that when you are not yourself, you might be able to live in harmony with others, but you are losing the roots of your vitality. Because the only way to preserve your vitality is to preserve your individuality, your individual culture. So you are an American, you must be a proud American, willing to accept all that is great and noble in America. At the same time, accept other cultures and make it even an integral part of yourself. But you don't have to become Indian completely, right? That is entirely up to you.
Yes.
So, that's why he says the Roman Empire collapsed not because of the barbarian invasions. Mainly, of course, it gave a push, but mainly because the vitality was lost. So there was a decay from within. The fruit had become rotten from within. Outside it looked wonderful, but the insect had got in and started chewing up everything. The result was when the empire was attacked from outside, it just collapsed. It could not stand up and resist. Right? So he says, when she fell to pieces, it was these barbarians and not the old peoples resurgent who became their heirs. Why? For their barbarism was at least a living force and a principle of life. But the Greco-Roman civilization had become a principle of death. See, when you don't live your true self, it becomes a principle of death. Very important for Sri Aurobindo's yoga. Surrender must be a willing surrender. And especially in spirituality, you have to will that, at least some part of you has to will that it has given itself up to Mother. There are parts that will resist, but that part has to be not because it is a fashion or because it is expected or because Mother has said, but because you have chosen to do it. Then there is vitality. Then there is force. So this is a very important concept. Be true to yourself and you will make progress. Ups and downs might be, but you will make progress. You will not be stagnant. So that's why he says their barbarism was at least a living force of life, but the Greco-Roman civilization had become a principle of death. All the living forces were destroyed by whose contact it could have modified and renewed its own force. In the end, it had itself to be destroyed in its form and its principle, resown in the virgin field of the vital and vigorous culture of medieval Europe. The next sentence is very interesting. What the Romans had not the wisdom to do by the organized empire, for even the profoundest and surest political instinct is not wisdom, had to be done by nature herself in the loose but living unity of Christendom. So you see, when the Roman Empire collapsed, what is it that kept Europe together? It was Christianity. It was the kingdom of Christ. That's why it's called Christendom. That kept Europe together. Right? So what the Roman could not do, Roman held it together by force and by some kind of cultural oneness. Here the unity was by religion. And that is why from the 5th century to the 12th century, it was a period of real European reawakening, because they were all released from that empire and there was a certain surge. But then, from the 12th century onwards or 11th century onwards, often it is referred in history as the Dark Ages. And the reason why it is known as the Dark Ages was that Christianity became corrupt. Christianity became itself perverted. Christianity began to impose itself, and Christianity came in the way of two things. which is not mentioned here but somewhere else. One is the life force, because austerity. Christianity is full of austerity, right? A lot of austerities in Christianity, and that killed the life force. And the second thing is that you have to accept the Bible without thinking, without reading even. It killed the mental force. And when your mental power is killed, and when your life power is weakened, inevitably you collapse.
In Europe, it took form of Inquisition.
Inquisition.
The Inquisition.
That was one of the worst forms
Yes,
of Christianity, right? That was when anybody who dared to criticize or was it
Would
called?
be burned on fire.
Yes, burnt. Joan of Arc is the most perfect example. So you see, two things that are very important. One is that the life force must be given its chance, which is sometimes threatening to unity. But you suppress the life force too much, you don't grow, you decay. And the mind force must be given its play. If that is also suppressed, then you don't grow. See, this is extremely important from the ashram point of view. Your surrender must be based on a free self-choice, either because you have read Aurobindo and developed your mind to such an extent that you have realized that it is useful, or because you have got a strong inner movement, right? But merely mechanically doing this, that's why in the book The Mother, where Aurobindo speaks of surrender, it must be a living surrender. It must not be a tamasic surrender, right? Everything is mother's will. You must be very sure before you say it is mother's will, right? Correct. So this is a very important thing that has to be understood. You have to grow spontaneously, truly, according to your nature, and your nature will be one, my nature will be another. And here I would like to remind you of one sentence. Exact words I am not able to give. I think it was written in education, regarding education. Sri Aurobindo says, every child or every individual is unique and has been brought into this world to express something of the divine which he alone can express. You have something to express which is Narad's way of expressing the divine. I have my way, she has her way, he has his way. Each one has got separate, right? And no one can say that. And the business of the teacher or instructor or parent is to help the child to find out what is that thing that he has to do. Have you found out? What God is expecting from you, what the divine is expecting from you to express, which you alone can express. Answer, have you found out? Somewhat.
No, I am trying to become transparent to the mother's force so that.
But you have not yet got a very clear position as to what is your role. See, now this is very important, because otherwise it's still a little vague. Once you are in contact with that force and you know exactly that this is my role, right? So, I'll give you an example of someone.
Have you found out yours?
I'll give you an example of someone. It is my example. In 1962, the school started getting grants from the government of India, UGC. And grants were two types. One was salary, which was given to the ashram because they are looking after us, and another was buying books, laboratory equipment, etc., etc., etc. And since I was working in the office, I had to look after the accounts. I knew nothing, but I learned it very fast. And I kept the accounts very carefully and thoroughly. And in fact, every Friday, Kirit Bhai, Pavitra Dai and myself used to meet and send the accounts to the mother. On Saturday morning, she would see it and she would say blessings. So, Amritada, with whom I used to work because he was in the accounts, the accounts were with him. And he was very close to mother. He said, Kittu, we need a chartered accountant from here. Now we are getting an outsider who is a chartered accountant. A disciple, no doubt, but he is still not an insider. So you should become the chartered accountant. In fact, it was the chartered accountant of the ashram who told this to Amritada, and Amritada told this to me. I said, look, it is not my problem. It is for mother to decide. So he said, you write it just now. So I wrote the letter right then. He went at 3 o'clock to mother and gave that letter. And mother wrote back immediately. I consider your work as a professor in the school as far, far, far more important than becoming a chartered accountant. Oh. In one stroke, she bowled me out. Amritada was bowled out because I was enjoying it, and it is a very privileged position. There are 200 teachers. There is one chartered accountant of the ashram. So you look up at that chartered accountant, right? So that I never had that dream, but many people thought that it would be very good for me. But exactly this is what mother said. So from there I am now convinced that my main job in this life is to communicate to others the teachings of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And she has given that to me in writing also. Because in 1971, that was the first time I was asked to give a talk in the ashram to a youth camp on human unity. So about 25 students from abroad and from India came. In Park Guest House, Aurobindo, Kirit Joshi, these big people, they used to give talk. And I don't know, all of a sudden Aurobindo came and asked me that you must also give a talk. So I was boosted like anything. I felt very proud that I am invited. Then Pranabda, Juwalla, they said, what are you going to talk about world unity? There is no unity in the ashram, so it will be all useless words. I said, yes, you are right. But then I had already committed myself. So I wrote to mother that will it be useful at all to give these talks? And mother's answer was very interesting. It's in French. If you can speak about Sri Aurobindo and his teachings in a simple, intelligible and comprehensive way, I can assure you that it will be very useful for you. Whether it will be useful for others or not, I do not know. And I tell you, I have given talks after talks to the army, especially in a very big way. Out of the 10,000 people whom I have addressed over a period of time, I think 5 people have been touched. So look at the percentage. And the Chief of Army Staff, General Joshi, he told me that in the army, when somebody gives a talk, everybody has to come. All the officers will be there, 500 officers, whether you like it or not, you have to sit there. And I used to see them dozing, dropping, because it was a very tiring day. And then at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I had to give a talk. So I requested them to make it in the morning when they are fresh. But it was difficult. But then he told me that out of all these people, 5 have thought about it. Something, and 2 will probably try to come back to you and see how do you put it into practice. So you can imagine the number is always very small. But I can tell you this from my own experience, that dealing with people who have neither belief nor faith nor have read anything about Sri Aurobindo, they pose all kinds of questions. And that made me realize that, well, I have to understand much better, right? And that is why, as Mother said, the best way of learning is to teach. Because then you have to learn. And of course, here in the classes in the ashram school, when I started teaching, I was a little clever. Whenever they asked me a question which I did not know how to answer, I tell them, look, you must think, and next time you must come and tell me whether you have got. Then if you have not got, then I'll give you the answer. In the meanwhile, I used to go to either myself or go to somebody who has read Sri Aurobindo well, and then got illustrated, and then I would explain it. Right? So,
What was the main subject you were supposed to teach in the school?
you see, I started teaching mathematics. Then, without my knowledge, all of a sudden, they made me a history teacher. And then in 1 year, they made me a history teacher of children of 12 to 17. One big leap. So I wrote to Mother that, I've got 9.5 out of 10 for human cycle and for history, but frankly speaking, I have not understood. But should I go ahead? And because when I'm teaching history, I remember sometimes from the human cycle there is a reference, so I am compelled to go back. So Mother said, you not only must use the human cycle, you must start teaching the human cycle. So then I started teaching the human cycle. Right? And then that human cycle, it has become part of me now. You can open any page in this book and read out 4 lines and I'll tell you where it is. So it has become almost ingrained into my system, right? And I think I've benefited enormously, because anything that happens today in the world, political or social or cultural, Indian culture, right? I always refer it to something that Sri Aurobindo has said. And that's a tremendous help, because first of all, you don't get depressed. You get a much better view of things, right? And you don't become too pessimistic. So whenever people come to me and say, oh God, India is now going to the dogs, and I say, don't worry. Right? It will not happen. It has lasted 5,000 years and it is now on the move upward. Despite all the ugliness and all the dirt, let us say. In fact, my niece, yesterday she came and she said that she has been 25 years in America, PhDs, very bright students. Sometimes a problem, because when they are so bright, they become very intellectualized and mentalized. And then, you have to break a little bit. So she is coming and studying with me, the human cycle. And I am breaking. And she is willingly accepting, because she has a lot of respect for Sri Aurobindo. So now this, she asked me all kinds of questions which I can't even dream of. It's so simple. But then I realized that, look, there are different mentalities and you have to work on them. So this is exactly where I have benefited enormously, right? So this is the blessing that you get when you study Sri Aurobindo seriously, not mechanically. There are very good devotees who start their morning every day, 10 minutes, they read mechanically Savitri. And in one place in the ashram, in a farm, agriculturists, right? They used to read Savitri from morning, every day, half an hour in the morning. They finished the whole of Savitri in 1 year, or something like that, right? But frankly speaking, nothing inside has happened. They have done the outer work. So it is good to read Savitri, because Savitri is another thing, and that is called a vibration. If you read it loudly, whether you like it or not, it will have its impact on you. But if you read it consciously, deliberately, slowly, it helps you in a very big way. That is why teaching is one of the best ways of learning. So anyway, just a little more. Now he says in the modern times, the example of Rome has haunted everybody. Everybody wants to do like what Rome did. That means denationalize the individuality of those nations which they have conquered. But he says no chance of success today, because nationalism and individualism have become very strong. And the more you try, the worse it will be. In fact, I am just summarizing, which I will do in detail next time. The world is moving slowly towards what is called a world culture, in which each individual culture will have its own place, but they will move towards a world culture. And that, I think, is happening very clearly. Today, for example, pizzas and pasta are eaten all over the world. Idlis are eaten everywhere in the world. In England, it is considered the safest food for children. It is one of the healthiest foods for children. So you see now, on the external plane, many things have happened which have become universalized. And slowly from there it will move to the deeper elements. And ultimately a day will come when true spirituality will also be, I'm using the word true spirituality because there are all kinds of spirituality. Those spiritualities which say that our God is the only God, right? And that is certainly not the right way and not healthy. That also will come. And that is already beginning to come. And there are two European ladies, one is Maria Wirth and another is somebody else, who write regularly on the internet. Wonderful. As Indian as any Indian can be. And in fact, she defends very strongly. So, this is happening now, little by little, little by little. And again, Aurobindo and Sri Aurobindo Ashram, the workshops for that. So, world culture is the future, without losing your own culture. So, remain Russian till the very end, etc., etc. You are
Slovenian.
Slovenia, yeah, you are Slovenians. Remain Slovenians and yet be part of the world culture and absorb everything that is good from everybody. And here in the end he speaks that Indian culture has got this capacity of absorption. So you will find some people who are anglicized completely. But on the whole, India is taking that which is good from the West, but faithful to itself. And today it is definitely happening. A few years back there were doubts a little bit, but now I think it is certainly happening.
Thank you, Kittu.